It's like crop rotation as well.
Crop rotation is a cultural technique which is also an important part of it. And so we were working on everything from understanding exactly what mechanisms are required to maximize the efficiency of natural control systems. We were also looking at the way in which pesticides interfere with these systems. We were looking at it from a laboratory perspective through to a real-world situation. For example, in eastern southern Africa, we were working on smallholder farming systems, seeing the way in which, for example, Western-style crops that we have learnt to develop as our staples here in Europe had been shifted into developing countries with a massive loss of indigenous knowledge, indigenous crops, where some of the key food crops that used to be grown there are now found on the sides of roads. And most of that indigenous knowledge has not been recorded in books, so it is passed down generation to generation. You create a gap of 1 or 2 generations because you force Western farming systems on and genetically modified crops and all the trappings of Western agro-ecosystems, and that knowledge is lost. And really how I became involved in the natural health scene was a recognition that first of all, as a researcher, you have limited impact because you produce research that's published, you work on development projects. We were working on projects with the World Bank, with the UK Department for International Development.
I've got to ask you this question,
yes.
then, because you were at a prestigious research organisation,
yeah,
undertaking research that was supported by the World Bank. Isn't that the sort of place where the agenda is always towards GMO? How come you were doing research into...
Because the same way as I had major agricultural biotech companies approach me and offer me large sums of money to work on the biocontrol, natural control systems to undo some of the mess that they were getting farming systems into. So, for example, one of my latter projects was working on the very huge cotton systems in Central Asia. And you may know that cotton is one of the crops where the most pesticide is applied.
I did actually. I read that on a label in my jeans the other day.
Well, there you go. So this view that cotton requires pesticides is something that we all grew up with. What many people didn't realize is that behind the Iron Curtain in the old Soviet Union, they'd had such horrendous experiences with pesticides contaminating the Aral Sea and the area which is now Uzbekistan. And they had quietly, on their own, without Western knowledge, before satellites really got involved in this thing, managed to create the 4th biggest cotton production area in the world. And what they had done is set up a whole series of 500 biological control factories where they were breeding up these natural organisms. They're getting school children out to release them everywhere.
These are insects that will kill the pests.
Exactly.
Or something.
And they were involved in intercropping with lucerne, with alfalfa, and they had this system that was in perfect balance, and it was cotton, and it was pretty much organic. And once the Soviet Union started to collapse, around about 1990, Uzbekistan became independent as one of the CIS countries. There was no longer the money to keep this whole thing operating. So,
but surely it was cheaper than buying in Roundup or whatever.
It would have been cheaper, but the way in which the system works for the corporations, and this was actually my final trigger for realizing I needed to do something about it, is that a group of biotech companies got together and put about 36 million, if I can recall accurately, 36, 38 million into this development project that I was a part of with a professor from Imperial who I've worked closely with, who's regarded as the leading expert in cotton pest management. And basically we were engaged to look at why the natural control systems were collapsing. To cut a very long story short, after several seasons working there, we discovered that the problem was linked to the fact that they had allowed these natural control systems to deteriorate. They weren't following accurately the detailed instructions that the Russian scientists had left them. They weren't doing their outbreeding programs. They had not enough money to keep the equipment running at the correct temperatures, and they were sending out these duff bugs. And of course, when we provided very strong recommendations that what they needed to do is put money back in to these factories and get the system established, re-established again.
They were using factories to breed the insects, weren't they?
Yeah.
Predator insects.
So the recommendation was to re-establish that system so you could get this natural system operating again.
Yeah.
And our reports were buried so that they could go out there and spray this massive area with pesticide. And that was the game plan all along.
I seem to remember, I don't know whether it was Gone with the Wind or something, I'm sure I saw a film where there was these big, huge, pupae, caterpillary things eating the cotton plants. Was that?
Yeah, the bollworms. Those are,
bollworms.
I mean, the bollworms, once you get into this pesticide treadmill, you kind of create a situation that demands pesticides because you get more and more resistance in your populations. You need to use more and more chemicals to keep, and it's like the kind of same parallel you see in human healthcare with the hospital superbugs and all the antimicrobial antibiotic compounds. It's the same kind of warfare.
And they all breed the resistance, don't they?
Exactly. So, if you like, the parallels became extraordinary for me when you look at what's happening in agriculture and you're looking at human healthcare. You look at the fact that you have, in agriculture, we as agricultural scientists, our job was to produce high-quality foods, yet there was almost no understanding of the need for those foods amongst the medical profession, who are supposedly the people in white coats who are meant to be looking after humans. And what had developed is this dichotomy of those people who, within the natural health community, understand the value of whole foods, understand that the leading killer diseases in all countries now are largely preventable nutritional and lifestyle-related diseases like cancer, like heart disease, diabetes, obesity and osteoporosis. They all have a very powerful nutritional cause. It's recognized by the World Health Organization.
Yeah, the World Health Organization says they're all preventable.